We're now joined by the leader of Alberta's opposition, Rachel Notley of the NDP. Ms. Notley, thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be able to chat with you.
Now, the Premier did raise, as you know, a number of issues in her address, but arguably the one topic that will have wider national implications is her Alberta Sovereignty Act. What do you make of her promise and her guarantee, as stated last night, that it will actually lead to greater national unity?
Well, I think that's a ridiculous claim. I think what we know her legislation will lead to is economic uncertainty, a chill on investment, and a further deterioration in terms of the ability of Albertans to secure all the things that they can and should get through their relationship with Ottawa. So, you know, and you don't have to just ask me for that. You can go through any one of the number of members of her current cabinet who have talked about the chaotic implications and the negative implications of pursuing this act.
Now, as you speak to Albertans, Ms. Notley, I'm wondering just how much support does a Sovereignty Act have amongst residents and potential voters?
You know, it really is not top of mind for most voters. So Alberta voters are concerned about affordability, and they are concerned about health care. And the Sovereignty Act is something that, frankly, isn't a big deal one way or the other. And when people do raise it, they mostly raise it to say they don't agree with it. So she's very much catering to a very extreme and very small group of people within Alberta. The people who, you know, the roughly 1% of Albertans who selected her as Premier. And she's not listening to the vast majority of Albertans who want to see her focus on much more important issues.
Well, let's pick up on those issues, beginning with healthcare, because Premier Smith did address the changes that she has begun with Alberta Health Services. That includes dismissing Dr. Dina Hinshaw, who led the province's COVID response, and also removing, almost a dozen board members from the AHS. Now, she's making the argument that health policies should be more reflective of local priorities. What do you make of that argument, given the actions that she's already undertaken?
Well, I don't think this work has anything to do with local priorities, and I think it's window dressing, designed to look like she's doing something, and to sort of keep at bay the many folks who are getting increasingly frustrated at her inability to make sound decisions when it comes to healthcare. Whether we're talking about, you know, firing our chief medical officer of health and then turning to someone like Paul Alexander for advice. You know, this is a person who characterized the vaccine as a bioweapon, for heaven's sakes. Whether it's the videos that appeared recently on social media just from, you know, a year and a half ago, where she is passionately, with great conviction, arguing for why people should accept her belief that we need to be paying for visits to family doctors out of our own pockets, or whether it's what she said last night, which was that she basically declared that, notwithstanding the crisis in Alberta's healthcare, she is unwilling to divert more resources to it, notwithstanding that, of course, the UCP has actually cut funding to healthcare over the last 3.5 years. So on every front, she's making the wrong choices with healthcare, and she's very much out of line with what Albertans want to see happen in order to restore stable and reliable care for them and their loved ones when they need it.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned affordability, and of course that's a concern right across the country right now. The Premier announced new anti-inflationary measures last night. They include $600 over 6 months for seniors and children under 18, suspension of the provincial fuel tax for the next 6 months, a $200 electricity rebate for consumers over the winter months, additional funding for food banks. Now, as I said, these concerns over inflationary pressures is shared amongst Canadians. What do you make of those measures of addressing the budgetary concerns that people are dealing with right now? Does it concern you that this money is coming just 6 months before a provincial election?
Well, indeed, you know, you really hit the nail on the head in your last remark there. I mean, let me start by saying, you know, I think some families might find some relief from this, and that's good. But the problem is that, you know, we do have a major affordability crisis, and this plan leaves about 2 million Albertans, many of whom earn far less than the ones who are getting access to some of these benefits, out of the plan. It essentially reads like a pre-election gift card. And so it's not something that Albertans can count on in the long term. And it also actually fails to make up for the significant losses experienced by Alberta's most vulnerable citizens as a result of cuts made by the UCP. Indeed, folks who receive AISH, which is our disability income, are still $3,000 or so behind where they would have been had the UCP not made the cuts they made when they first got elected. So the other thing is that a lot of the things that were announced last night were really designed to undo many of the cuts and the downloads onto Alberta families that have happened over the course of the last 3.5 years.
But forgive me for interrupting.
Forgive me. About $2 billion.
Yeah, but forgive me for interrupting. But Alberta is, and perhaps surprisingly so, given inflationary pressures, now in a budgetary surplus position. So arguably, the province can now afford it. Is that not true?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I think some of these things the province can afford, but the point is you need to do